back to Globalogs. This is going to be our 8th and final episode on the Venezuela narrative. There it is, for the final time. Stability in Venezuela and the future of the Bolivarian Revolution. And in this final episode, I'm going to take some time, which is to say, the episode, to address the question of, why? Why did I bother to spend so much time on a story that has gotten so little coverage in most of the top-line international media, and is a story that, at least on the surface, seems to intersect so little with what many people outside Venezuela experience in their day-to-day lives, who I imagine constitutes most of you, the audience. One reason, I can say, was kind of self-interested for me here at Globalogs, which is that I hope to use a story that you probably hadn't seen very much or read a lot about or knew deeply from other sources, so you could have the experience of getting to know one particular chunk of the international story, as it were, through us first, and in so doing begin to see and experience these kinds of international affairs through the global narratives lens that I've been talking about. While on that subject as well, about the global narratives, I was further hoping, I chose this narrative in specific because in so many ways it's kind of the prototypical narrative. It's got competing interests, big financial stakes, big geostrategic stakes. You've got a mid-sized country, Venezuela, about 30 million people. You've got the world's most important resource involved, oil. You've got the world's largest and second largest economies, the United States and China, as in a kind of a proxy conflict, but also not a conflict, it's just sort of a adversarial situation in a region that has been the site of many such proxy plays over much of the last 50 to 70 years. You've got major shifts in policy from one type of political economy to another. You've got charismatic leaders. You've got revolutions. You've got upheaval. You've got it's dramatic. And my hope was that in being able to see a story that you were, with luck, seeing for the first time and see all these different dimensions of it, it might make it clearer the way these stories work more generally. But sort of the broader point still of the Venezuela narrative, even though you may not have heard about it before hearing about it here on Globalogs, I think there's probably a better chance of your having heard about it than having heard about any number of different narratives in, say, Sri Lanka or Botswana or Myanmar, or any number of the other dozens and dozens of narratives that we're going to talk about here on Globalogs over the course of the next few years. But the thing that's important to remember is that all of these stories, constituted by the actors and the institutions and the countries and everything that make them up, go on every day. And most of what happens in the world is invisible to most people, except those who actually have to live them and act them. Even though those acts, undertaken every day, all around the world, can and often do have effects on things far beyond their initial intent. Here in Venezuela, you had a situation where a country had become very dependent on one resource over the course of a number of decades because of political and economic decisions made by people in power, and as a consequence got itself to a point where it felt that the only way out of its present condition of inequality and sort of general unease was a revolutionary choice. And revolutionary choices are made under extreme circumstances, but extreme circumstances don't arise overnight. They're the consequence of choices that are made over years and decades. And oftentimes, we don't notice the revolutionary conditions until they are already upon us, even though the origins of those conditions can be seen years in advance if you know where to look and you know what you're looking for. And when it gets to the point where you're already facing a revolutionary condition, it's generally too late for most people to understand the situation fully and to react appropriately and to do so with a clear head. Ultimately, though, we get back to my primary argument, which is that where we are, any place, any time, now or in history, socially, politically, economically, is the consequence of choices. Choices made by people, by institutions, in situations that they found themselves in, from things that they saw as available to them. And the more it's possible to understand how those choices are made by people, the better it is possible to understand what's going on now and think about what might be happening in the future. And that talking about the kinds of choices made in a story like this, like the Venezuela story, I hope that it might allow us to see more easily other choices made by other people in other situations, and in so doing, get that broader understanding of the world that I hope Globalogs can bring to you. So that's our Venezuela story. I hope it was useful to you, and I hope that my explanation of why it was covered in the first place was partially satisfying, or maybe completely satisfying. And we will pick up again in the next few days with our next narrative, and I'll be seeing you then. Bye-bye.